Hello again. I coached Karen Dark, the 2016 Paralympic champion, for about 8 years. And one of the biggest challenges that we had was that she used to get fitter quite early in the year. She was really fit coming into the season. And then we somehow had to either maintain that fitness or ideally increase that fitness to peak in when the major championships were at the end of the year in September. One of the reasons I think that she became so fit early in the year was because she lived in Mallorca from maybe November or December and had a really good routine. And I think it's the routine that's fundamental to building fitness, that daily routine and the weekly routine, just doing the good things, having good habits, that makes the big difference to building fitness. And the overall plan is sort of secondary to these processes. So one of the things I really love is actually making plans, making detailed long-term plans. But I've become disillusioned with it over time because plans can fall through, as Morrissey said, if you're from that era, and often they do. In fact, usually they do. So you've got this great plan. You might be 2 or 3 weeks into the plan, or 2 or 3 months into the plan, and something goes wrong. You get ill. Something happens that you miss a few weeks training, and therefore you're not back to square one, but you might feel you're back to square one, and you've got to somehow deal with that. So rather than having a long-term detailed plan now, I like to have a long-term framework and focus on getting that routine right. Because getting fit is about consistently showing up and doing good things, having good habits and doing the day-to-day work. The exact details of what you do are less important, as has been shown by numerous studies. It's just doing the training is much more important than specifically what you do in the training, unlike what a lot of the magazines and YouTube channels might tell you. So in the context of endurance cycling and also endurance running, we work with both runners and cyclists. What we mean by a routine, a good routine, is consistently showing up and doing the work so that your body adapts incrementally to the load that you're applying to it. And by having a good routine, everything's a bit more smooth, and consequently you don't waste as much time doing other things, and consequently you don't waste as much energy doing other things. And secondly, endurance sport requires not just physical resilience but mental resilience, and consistently showing up, perhaps sometimes when you don't really want to, or you've got other things that might be more interesting to do, and doing the training and working through these sometimes grueling training sessions consistently helps you develop mental fortitude. Like your physical fitness builds incrementally day after day of putting the time in and the training in, your mental resilience also builds as you put the time in and gradually realise that you can do more and more and get through the training and ultimately the events that you choose as stepping stones towards your ultimate goal. And thirdly, having a good routine helps you practice good nutrition, because if you know you're doing certain things at the same time each day, you can get your nutrition and your hydration right, because if something's not quite right one day, you can change it a little bit for the next day. So actually having good habits is a great way to build a better routine, because you can incrementally change things. Don't worry too much whether you've got a perfect routine. Don't spend ages planning your routine. Just do something. Think, oh, I could do that a little bit better, and then do it a little bit better. And as you do that, you'll get physically fitter, mentally fitter, and your nutrition and your hydration will be better, and consequently you'll get fitter mentally and physically again, because it all builds on each other. If you have a good routine and you know you're doing certain things at a certain time each day, then your body clock adjusts to sleep consistently and more effectively. And if you can plan little rest periods throughout your day, because you know you've got time for certain things and your other things are going much more smoothly, then your recovery will be much better, and therefore your physiological gains will be much better. However, it's very easy to come up with a plan because you're all excited, you want to write everything down, you think, right, I'm going to go to the gym every day, I'm going to go out cycling every day for 2 hours or whatever. But sticking to a routine can be a bit more difficult, particularly after that first week or so, when a few of the life things or life realities might have got in the way and you've missed a few sessions perhaps, or the enthusiasm's worn off. So how do you establish a good routine and stick with it? The first thing is to be realistic about how much time you've got to spend. Think about all the external factors and the external pressures as well that people might put on you. Is your partner engaged with this process? Are they going to support you in your training? And if you're not sure about that, then it's something to address with them up front and make sure that they're on board with it. So once you've assigned slots for your training throughout the week, I like to work with a weekly routine. Even though some people say, well, as you get older, you could, like Joe Friel was saying, well, why not have a 10-day cycle? But most people live a week at a time. Most people, even if you're retired, you still have weekends because you have to interact with other people, or certain things happen at the weekend and certain other things happen during the week. I find that a weekly routine, or maybe just a fortnightly routine, so it fits into the calendar week, is the best way to go. So you've now got your available time, your training slots. So the next thing to do is put in your hard sessions. So by a hard session, I mean a high intensity session, a long session, or maybe a strength session. Any training session that's going to take you more than a few hours to recover from, I would consider to be a hard session. And you don't want to do those back to back. I usually work with about 3 hard sessions a week. So that might be a very hard interval session, a sort of medium but longer interval session, and a long training session, so a long ride, for instance. And then you have to assign priorities to what you're trying to develop at each time of year, which is part of your long-term, your long-term framework, working on your weaknesses. And I'll talk about a long-term plan next week. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have a long-term plan, but I think it should be a long-term framework that feeds into your routine. And the next thing is to fill up the other available slots of time with low intensity training, with aerobic endurance, sort of all your zone 2 stuff. And to some extent, the more of that you do, the better you'll be. Like if you think of the elite athletes do huge amounts of training, but most of it's fairly low intensity. Of course, there is the caveat that you don't want to make yourself so tired that you can't do the hard sessions, because the hard sessions are the ones where you're making the big gains. And as you progress, make sure you track your performance. One thing I do now is I tend to block 2 weeks at a time. So I do 2 weeks the same. I might then have an easy week and then another 2 weeks the same as the first harder 2 weeks. And then you can see how things are developing. And if after that 6-week block of 2 hard, 1 easy, 2 hard, 1 easy, you can then decide whether you've achieved your goals for that block of training, or whether to do another 3 weeks, another 2 hard weeks and 1 week easy, to see whether you can push things a bit more and build your fitness a bit more. And in that case, you would have to adjust your overall framework. But if you don't have that routine and you don't do similar things on similar days each week, it's very much harder to track your progress and establish whether you're achieving what you hope to achieve. And if you're not sure, I mean, this is where a coach can come in, or a training partner. If you're not sure where to go, if things aren't going quite as you would hoped, then, well, get in touch with me or Claire, and we're happy to talk to you, or share emails, or just put something in the comments. A good routine is the backbone to building endurance fitness. And if you can establish a good routine and stick with it for a few months, getting back on track if things go wrong, or when things go wrong, because it's very unlikely that it'll go completely smoothly, then I'm sure you'll reach amazing levels of fitness that you wouldn't ever have expected, just by being consistent and showing up and doing similar things on similar days each week. And next week we'll talk about an overall framework, how to establish an overall framework to guide your routine. It's something that's flexible and that you can adjust based on the results of your training and how things are progressing, so that you get to your events in the best shape possible. It might be that you're training for a Super Randonneur series, it might be that you're training for London, Edinburgh, London in 2 years' time, or it might be that you've got a series of bikepacking events lined up for next year, and how do you train for those, recover from them, so that you get the best performance in each of them. So I'll see you next time. Subscribe, click the bell so that you find out about it, and I'll see you next week. Bye.